The baby's heartbeat was steady, but what flashed across that screen made my stomach tighten. My name's Rayn. I'm 37, a Marine through and through, and just 2 weeks ago I stepped off a plane from Kandahar after 8 long months overseas. Now I found myself in a cold, white exam room in Phoenix, watching my wife Emily go through her ultrasound, when suddenly, Dr. Bradley Richardson's hands began to tremble like he'd stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see. His voice cracked as he told me, "Sir, you need to step outside right now and call an attorney." The sentence cut into me harder than any shrapnel I'd faced in combat. Emily lay on the table, her belly slick with gel, her eyes darting back and forth between me and the doctor, her expression painted with confusion. She'd been wearing that same look often lately, like she was always testing whether she could still read me. I asked if something was wrong with the baby, forcing my voice to stay calm the way years of training had taught me. Hold steady when everything else is falling apart. Richardson's face was pale, his forehead damp, his hand brushing away the sweat as he kept sneaking nervous glances at the monitor. The man had been in practice for 2 decades, his certificates lined up neatly on the wall, and yet he looked like he was staring at classified intel that shouldn't exist. "The baby is fine," he repeated, then leaned closer and lowered his voice so only I could hear. "But what this screen shows is development consistent with 32 weeks. His words hung in the room, heavier than the hum of the machines. Emily kept smiling, pretending nothing was out of the ordinary, just like she had been pretending since the day I got home. 32 weeks, I muttered back. He nodded, steady this time. I ran the numbers instantly. 32 weeks ago, I was packing gear into a transport headed to Afghanistan. 32 weeks ago, I kissed Emily goodbye at Sky Harbor Airport. 32 weeks ago, I was sleeping under canvas halfway across the world. Richardson studied my face like he was waiting for me to crack, waiting for shouting or broken furniture. But I just sat there in silence, processing it the same way I processed mission intel. Slow, methodical, detached. Then Emily spoke my name, soft and fragile, asking why we all looked so grim. I turned toward her and really looked for the first time in months. The phone she kept checking. The way she described the pregnancy like it was some surprise blessing dropped out of the sky. The way she insisted we wait for me to be back before scheduling this very appointment. She wanted me here, in this room, at this moment. The realization slid into me like ice water, numbing everything else. My mind drifted back to the day we first met, 6 years earlier at a barbecue in Tempe, and how that first smile of hers had felt like the beginning of something unshakable. Now all I could see was how fast that foundation was crumbling under me. She worked as a dental hygienist back then, always carrying this laugh that could brighten a whole room and make people turn their heads. I was stationed at Luke Air Force Base before I got my transfer orders to Camp Pendleton, just another young Marine thinking I had the world figured out. She once told me she dreamed about marrying a man in uniform, said she admired the commitment, the discipline, and the sacrifices that came with the life. 3 years later, we made it official with a small wedding at her parents' church. Nothing fancy, just family and a few friends watching us say vows under the wooden cross at the front. During our marriage, I deployed twice, both short tours, nothing that dragged on for years, but long enough to test the bond we claimed to have. She managed it well, or at least that's what I believed. She mailed care packages with little notes tucked inside, wrote letters that smelled faintly of her perfume, and kept the house spotless while I was gone. The kind of dedication other Marines noticed and envied when I'd share stories. 8 months ago, when this Kandahar deployment came up, she clung to me at the airport, tears rolling down her cheeks, and I could tell they were real, not the staged kind I'd seen before from women who wanted attention more than they wanted. Loyalty. She promised she'd be here when I returned, said she'd keep busy by maybe signing up for classes or fixing the backyard garden she'd always talked about. I remember boarding that plane thinking I'd hit the jackpot in life. The first month away, we had video calls every few days. She looked exhausted, but said it was just the weight of being on her own, which felt normal. By the second month, the calls got shorter, and she explained she was taking evening classes at the community college, pottery of all things, said it calmed her nerves and gave her something to do. By the third month, most of what I got were short text messages. Busy day at work, miss you, everything's fine. And I chalked it up to her adjusting, because military wives learn to survive by building their own rhythm. 2 weeks ago, I finally stepped off the plane and came home, but something about her was different. She seemed jumpy, like her mind was someplace else. She had put on weight, said it was from stress eating, and started wearing baggy clothes. She mentioned stomach issues, maybe a bug, nothing serious. Then last week, she sat me down with tears streaming and told me she was pregnant. Said she'd found out just days after I left and wanted to surprise me with the news when I returned. Claimed she was about 10 weeks along, crying these happy tears like she'd given me the best gift possible. 10 weeks. I did the math in my head, and it didn't line up. I'd only been home a week and a half, and the timeline was impossible. Still, she had already booked an ultrasound and said she wanted me there for the first glimpse of our baby. I told myself to believe her, told myself maybe miracles happen because I felt proud walking into that clinic, thinking after everything, maybe this deployment had been worth it. Sitting in that exam room, though, watching the doctor's face change as the machine hummed, I realized the math wasn't just off, it was way off. Doctor. Richardson stood frozen, glancing between me and the screen, while Emily kept asking questions, her voice rising with each one. I felt something inside me snap, but years of training kept my expression calm, steady, unreadable. 32 weeks, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, and the words hung in the room like smoke. Richardson nodded carefully, his hands no longer trembling, but his eyes flicked toward the door like he wanted to run. "Sir, I have to ask," he began, his voice tight, and I knew the truth was about to crush me harder than any deployment ever had. Emily's face drained of color the second doctor. Richardson asked if I'd even been present for the conception, not the confusion you'd expect, but the kind of caught-off-guard white where every lie comes crashing down. "Rayn, I don't understand what's happening," she said, though her voice betrayed her. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was panic trying to hold itself together. "What does 32 weeks mean?" I rose slowly from the chair, spine straight, shoulders squared, all those years of training in my posture, and I told her it meant I'd been in Afghanistan when this baby was conceived. The silence after that was the heaviest I've ever known, like even the machines understood the weight of the truth. Emily whispered that it wasn't possible, but she couldn't look me in the eye. Her gaze stuck on the ceiling while her hands trembled against the paper cover of the exam table. She clung to her line, saying she was 10 weeks along, that she got pregnant right before I deployed. But Dr. Richardson cleared his throat and stated the facts. The measurements were undeniable. This pregnancy was 32 weeks, conceived roughly 8 months ago. I watched her face crumble as her careful web of lies unraveled right there under the harsh fluorescent lights. Maybe she lost track of time. Maybe she thought I wouldn't check. Maybe she was so wrapped in her own story that she forgot math doesn't bend to feelings. "There has to be a mistake," she said, sitting up suddenly, the paper crinkling under her weight, blaming the machine, the files, anything she could grasp. But my mind was already turning elsewhere. Neighbors who helped out, yard work that somehow needed extra hands. A man named Jason Williams she'd mentioned too casually on a few calls. He fixed fences, lifted heavy furniture, and somehow his name kept weaving into our conversations like a shadow I hadn't seen until now. I thought about those shorter calls, about pottery classes stretching into late evenings, about how eager she was to schedule this ultrasound. She'd wanted me here, wanted me to see the images, wanted me to believe the child was mine so I'd commit to raising another man's blood as my own. The weight in my chest spread cold, not anger yet. Just the sharp clarity that comes when your whole world lines up in a sniper's scope and you can see everything too clearly to deny. "Dr. Richardson," I said, my voice flat, "I need copies of everything. Every measurement, every image, the full report." Emily's voice spiked, panicked now. "Rayn, what are you doing? You're scaring me." I looked at her, really looked. 6 years of marriage condensed into the ugly truth that I'd been gone for 8 months, sleeping under desert stars while she slept with someone else. "I'm gathering facts," I told her, like any mission requires. And in her eyes, I could see she knew this mission was over before it began. The drive home was wrapped in silence she tried to break with excuses, her words spinning out desperate explanations that collapsed under their own weight. Maybe they mixed up my file with another patient's, she said, her fingers twisting so tight I thought she might cut off her own circulation. Medical mistakes happen. You remember when they sent you someone else's blood test results? I kept my eyes forward, knuckles firm on the wheel, the steady hum of the tires grounding me while her voice cracked beside me. I thought about the countless nights in Afghanistan when I'd stared at the stars and pictured her waiting, imagined her cooking dinner for one, imagined her lonely but faithful. Now those visions twisted into something hollow and rotten, a house with lights on but shadows moving inside. Every mile closer to home felt heavier, the weight not of a child but of betrayal, of promises broken in the dark while I risked everything thousands of miles away. And she kept talking, trying to patch holes in a sinking ship, but I was already somewhere else, mapping out next steps the way I always had, calm, measured, with the truth as my only weapon. Phoenix traffic pressed around us like nothing unusual was happening. Commuters honking, stoplights changing, kids in back seats eating snacks, all while my marriage cracked open in the passenger seat. Emily clung to any excuse she could find, her voice trembling as she insisted maybe the ultrasound machine had been wrong. Maybe it was just a computer glitch. She said computers made errors all the time, but I could hear the desperation. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked untouched. The neat gravel desert landscaping, the red tile roof glowing in the sun, the basketball hoop I had cemented into place 3 summers back. But all of it felt foreign now. I cut the engine, listened to the soft ticks of metal cooling, and stared straight ahead. Emily shifted in her seat and whispered, "Rayn, please say something. You're making me nervous." I turned to look at her, really study her, and suddenly the pieces aligned. The sudden weight gain wasn't stress. The baggy clothes weren't comfort. And the way she'd avoided certain positions since I returned wasn't random. "When are you due?" I asked. She froze, stammered, "What?" I repeated it, calm, steady. "If you're 32 weeks pregnant, when's the baby due?" Her mouth moved without words, her brain scrambling for the safest lie. Finally, she muttered that the doctor hadn't said exactly. I filled the silence for her. 8 weeks. 32 plus 8 is 40. You're due in 8 weeks. The numbers hit her harder than my voice ever could. We stepped out of the truck, me steady, her unsteady, and walked into the house. The familiar scent of her vanilla candles wrapped the air, but instead of comfort, it smelled like a cover-up. This wasn't a home anymore. It was evidence. I went straight to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and stared out back where Jason Williams tinkered on his motorcycle. Mid-40s, lean from construction work, divorced a couple years back. I'd heard his name casually enough in Emily's updates while I was gone. Helped with the fence, moved patio furniture. Such a good neighbor. Now his presence just over that cinder block wall felt heavy, undeniable. "You want me to make lunch?" Emily chirped too brightly, her voice pitched high, like play acting at normal. I didn't turn around when I asked, "How long have you been sleeping with Jason?" Her sharp intake of breath told me the answer before her words did. The glass in her hand slipped, exploded against the tile, shards scattering like the truth finally breaking loose. "What did you just say?" she gasped. I turned, faced her full on. "You heard me." Her face twisted with forced outrage, her voice climbing as she insisted it was insane, that Jason was just a neighbor, that he only helped her while I was gone, that she couldn't believe I'd accuse her of something like this. But her feet betrayed her, backing away, not standing firm. Innocent people don't retreat. They stand tall. "The baby is yours," she pressed, her tone growing harder as if volume could rewrite reality. "I don't know what that doctor thinks he saw, but this baby is yours. We'll get a second opinion. We'll go to another doctor." I crouched down, picked up the broken glass piece by piece. The jagged edges caught the light like the sharpness of the truth itself. My voice stayed level when I said, "Emily, I've been trained to gather intel, to read people, to spot deception. That's what I do. It's who I am." Her mask cracked then, and her words lashed out, sharp, defensive. "This isn't Afghanistan." She thought that jab might knock me back, but it only steadied me more. Afghanistan had taught me discipline, taught me patience, taught me that chaos reveals who people truly are. And right there, standing in my own kitchen with the smell of candles and betrayal heavy in the air, I saw exactly who she was. This is our marriage. This is our life, I said as I stood up, the words coming out flat, steady, final. I dumped the sharp glass shards into the trash can, their edges catching the light like tiny reflections of truth. You're right. In Afghanistan, when someone lies to you, they're usually trying to kill you. Here, they're just trying to destroy your life. Emily's face crumpled, and the tears came hard. These weren't the staged tears I'd seen when she hugged me at the airport 8 months ago. These were raw, messy, panicked sobs that streaked her face with desperation. I love you, she begged, her voice broken and uneven. Whatever you think happened, I love you. I didn't answer right away. I walked past her toward our bedroom, the sound of her crying trailing behind me. I'm going to pack some things, I said. She scrambled after me, her voice cracking with fear. Where are you going? To get a lawyer, I told her. Rayn, please. We can work through this. The baby needs a father. I stopped in the doorway, turned just enough to look at her. The baby has a father. It's just not me. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and she had no reply. That night, I checked into a cheap motel near Luke Air Force Base. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet, the kind of place I'd crashed in 100 times during training exercises. The familiarity gave me a strange sense of calm. At 7 the next morning, I called my lawyer, Derek Parker. We'd used him before for the house paperwork and our wills. Former Army himself, he knew the rhythm of military life, the way betrayal hits differently when you've lived by loyalty and discipline. When he answered, his voice was brisk. Rayn, what can I do for you? I laid it all out, the ultrasound, the timeline, the numbers that no lie could cover. Silence hung for a moment before he exhaled. Jesus, brother. I'm sorry, that's rough. I need to know my options, I said. His voice shifted into professional gear. First, we get a DNA test to confirm non-paternity. Second, we document everything. Ultrasound reports, communications with your wife, any admission she makes. Third, we prepare for divorce proceedings. Arizona's a community property state, but if we prove infidelity and misuse of marital resources, it could affect division of assets. We'll need evidence. After the call, I drove back to the house. Emily's car wasn't in the driveway. She was likely at work, pretending her world hadn't just been exposed. My key still worked. It was still my house, after all. Inside, the silence pressed heavy, but my focus was sharp. I went straight to the home office, opened the desk drawers where Emily kept bills and paperwork. I'd never snooped before. Never had reason to. What I found turned suspicion into certainty. Credit card statements with charges at restaurants I'd never visited. Hotel stays in Scottsdale. Short stays, single nights, too frequent to be chance. Receipts for men's clothing in size large. I wore a medium. Phone bills showing hundreds of calls to Jason Williams' number, starting about a month after my deployment began. Each page felt like another round slamming into the chamber. But the worst was the receipt from a women's clinic in Tempe, dated 7 months ago. Prenatal vitamins, a pregnancy test. Proof she'd known almost from the beginning. 7 months she'd had to come clean, to make a choice, and her plan had been to build a lie strong enough to trap me in it. I took photos of every piece of evidence with my phone, methodical, just like a field report. Gather intel, secure facts, prepare for the next step. When I finished and slipped the papers back, I heard a car pulling into the driveway. My pulse stayed steady. Emily was home early. I moved into the kitchen, waiting. She stepped through the front door and froze when she saw me. I thought you were staying somewhere else, she said, voice thin with surprise. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, my phone heavy in my pocket with the evidence I'd collected. Change of plans, I said evenly. She set her bag down, her hands trembling just slightly. Her eyes darted toward me, then away, as if the walls themselves held judgment. The room was quiet, save for the faint tick of the clock above the fridge. I studied her, this woman I'd shared a life with, and realized she was a stranger now. A stranger standing in my kitchen, wearing my ring, carrying another man's child. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin another excuse, but I held up a hand to stop her. I wasn't interested in her words anymore. I had the truth. And the truth was enough. I came back for some things, that was the line I gave her, but really I came back to see if she'd keep lying to my face. She set her purse down on the counter, eyes narrowing slightly, careful, measuring me. "Have you been going through my stuff?" she asked. "Should I have been?" I shot back, and her expression gave me every answer I needed. "Rayn, whatever you think you found, there's an explanation." I didn't argue. I just pulled out my phone and tapped to the first photo, one of the restaurant receipts, 5 months old. Dinner for two, paid for on our joint credit card. "Explain this." She looked at it and the color drained out of her face again, like she was reliving the ultrasound moment all over. "I took my sister out for her birthday," she said quickly. "Your sister lives in Tucson," I reminded her. "She was visiting," she pushed, but her voice didn't carry conviction. I swiped to the next photo, the hotel receipt from Scottsdale. "What about this?" Silence, just silence. My thumb moved again, the men's clothing receipt. "And this?" She collapsed into a chair like someone had cut her strings. The fight was gone. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady, stripped of emotion. "Rayn," she started, but I pressed. "How long have you been sleeping with Jason?" Her hands went to her face, covering the tears, the shame. "It's not what you think." "How long?" I repeated, sharp, direct. "Since about a month after you left," she whispered. "But it wasn't planned. It just happened 7 months, almost my entire deployment." I asked about the baby, and she said she didn't know. Maybe it was mine, maybe it wasn't. "The timing," I told her flatly. "You know it's not mine." She lifted her head then, mascara running in dark lines down her cheeks. "What are you going to do?" But I was already walking toward the door, no hesitation left. Derek Parker's office sat in Scottsdale, 20 minutes down the freeway from the house. It was a modern building, all steel beams and glass, professional to the core. I sat across from him at a dark wood desk, sliding the printed photos across like evidence in a briefing. He studied each one, methodical, former Army discipline still alive in him. "This is comprehensive," he said finally. "Credit cards, phone logs, medical records. It's airtight." He looked up at me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm functional," I told him. He nodded. He knew what that meant. Functional wasn't living, but it was surviving, and survival was step one. "Here's what we'll do," he said, his voice steady. "First, we file for divorce on grounds of adultery. Arizona allows fault-based divorce, and you've got hard evidence. Second, we'll get a court-ordered DNA test to confirm non-paternity. Third, we'll file to recover marital funds spent on the affair." "The house?" I asked. He leaned back. "With this level of proof, we can argue for a disproportionate share. Judges don't like when marital assets are used for betrayal." "How long?" I pressed. "Depends if she fights. If she's smart, she'll settle. If not, months." When I left, I carried a folder full of paperwork and a court date 3 weeks away. The petition would be served to Emily at her workplace the next day, professional and clean. No screaming, no spectacle, just the law doing what needed to be done. That evening, I drove back to the house. Emily was in the kitchen, apron on, the smell of chicken and rice filling the air. She turned when she heard me, eyes flickering with hope like maybe this was a chance to reset. "I made your favorite," she said, forcing a small smile. The wooden spoon trembled in her hand. I set my folder down on the counter and said it plain. "I filed for divorce today." The spoon clattered to the tile, bouncing once before it settled. Her hands flew to her face, her shoulders shaking. "Rayn, please." Can't we talk about this? I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. She stepped toward me, desperate. We built a life together. 6 years. Doesn't that mean something? I looked at her, really looked, and what I saw was the woman who had shared my bed while carrying another man's child. It means I trusted you, I said, and you cashed that trust in for hotel rooms and lies. Her knees seemed to buckle, and she gripped the counter to stay upright. I walked past her, headed for the bedroom to grab the last of my things. In the hallway, I could hear her sobbing, repeating my name like it was a lifeline. But the sound didn't pull me back. It only pushed me forward. When I loaded my bag into the truck, the desert evening light painted the house golden, almost peaceful. The same basketball hoop, the same roof tiles, the same candles burning in the window. From the outside, it looked like stability. From the inside, it was a ruin, and I drove away knowing that everything had already burned down long before I found the match. The baby isn't mine. We'll have the DNA test to put it in black and white. But deep down, both of us already know the truth. Emily turned off the stove, the pan still steaming behind her, and faced me with eyes that looked hollow. What do you want? You want me to beg? Fine, I'll beg. I made a mistake. I was lonely, I was scared, Jason was there, and I made a terrible mistake. My voice was calm, stripped of all heat. 7 months isn't a mistake. 7 months is a choice. She broke again, tears cutting lines down her cheeks. I love you. I shook my head. No, you don't. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 7 months in another man's bed while I was getting shot at in Afghanistan. Her shoulders slumped, her hands trembling as she tried to hold the facade together. I was going to tell you. When? I asked. After the baby was born, she whispered. I was going to tell you everything. My jaw tightened. You were going to let me raise another man's child for 18 years and only then admit the truth. She didn't answer, but her silence was an answer all the same. I'm staying at a motel until this is over, I said, moving toward the door. The papers will be served tomorrow. You'll want to find a lawyer. Rayn, wait, she called after me, her voice ragged. I stopped in the doorway, not turning yet. What about us? What about our marriage? I turned my head just enough to meet her eyes. 6 years of marriage. 3 years thinking I knew who you were. There is no us. There hasn't been an us since you chose Jason Williams. She broke into sobs, the wooden spoon clattering to the floor as dinner sat forgotten on the stove. But I walked out. Outside, Jason was in his driveway again, bent over that same motorcycle. The sound of my truck starting drew his attention, and for the briefest moment, our eyes locked. He dropped his gaze first, pretending to busy himself with a wrench. Cowards always look away first. The courtroom was small, sterile, and cold. Judge Linda Hernandez presided from the bench, her expression carved from stone. Emily sat across the aisle, her lawyer beside her, a slick young man in an expensive suit who already looked like he'd rather be arguing over parking tickets. My lawyer, Derek Parker, was calm, organized, precise. He'd stacked the evidence neatly in a folder, each piece like a round in the chamber. When our turn came, he laid it all out. The phone records, the credit card statements, the hotel receipts, the prenatal medical records, and most damning of all, the DNA test. 0 probability of paternity. Your Honor, Derek said, his voice steady. The evidence clearly shows the defendant engaged in an extramarital affair during the plaintiff's deployment, used marital funds to support this affair, and attempted to deceive the plaintiff into raising another man's child. Emily's lawyer tried to object, tried to minimize, saying infidelity had no bearing on property division. But Judge Hernandez wasn't green. 20 years on the bench had given her a nose for lies and a heart hardened against excuses. She leaned forward slightly, her tone crisp. The court finds that the defendant's actions constitute a significant breach of the marital relationship and misuse of marital property. The plaintiff is awarded 65% of all marital assets, including the family home. The defendant is ordered to reimburse the plaintiff for marital funds spent in furtherance of the affair. Emily sat there, eyes on the table, her hands gripping each other so tight her knuckles went white. No tears this time, just silence, just defeat. But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, the defendant is solely responsible for all medical costs related to the pregnancy and birth, as the child is not the plaintiff's biological offspring. She struck her gavel once. Final. The sound echoed in the chamber like a rifle crack. Outside the courthouse, the Arizona sun beat down hard, but the air felt cooler on my skin than it had in weeks. Emily rushed after me, heels clattering against the concrete, her voice calling out, "Rayn, wait!" I stopped on the courthouse steps, folder under my arm, and turned slowly. She stood there, hair disheveled, makeup streaked, looking nothing like the woman I'd once thought I knew. Her lips parted like she had 100 things to say, but only one made it out. "Please." I looked at her. 6 years condensed into one broken moment, and I realized there was nothing left for me to give her. "It's over, Emily," I said quietly. "You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing on the courthouse steps with nothing but the weight of her own lies to keep her company. I stopped walking but didn't turn around right away. Her voice reached me, thin and raw. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." When I finally turned, she stood under the Arizona sun, her belly visible now, round and undeniable beneath a loose dress. 2 months more, and she would have a child in her arms, but no husband beside her and no father willing to claim the responsibility. I shook my head. "Sorry doesn't bring back 8 months, I told her. The words landed heavy, and she just nodded, then turned and walked away without another word. 3 months later, I sat in Derek Parker's office and signed the final papers. The house was mine. The bank accounts divided the way the court had ordered. Emily had packed up her life and moved back to her parents' place in Ohio, leaving Arizona behind. Jason Williams hadn't fared much better. Word spreads fast in construction, especially in a state tied so closely to defense contracts and military families. Sleeping with a deployed Marine's wife doesn't make you popular in that circle. He lost his job, and when his ex-wife learned about the affair during her own court proceedings, it cost him even more in settlement modifications. By the time I heard through the grapevine, Jason had left town and moved down to Tucson, trying to rebuild something out of the wreckage. I stayed in the house for 6 more months, walking through rooms that carried too many ghosts. Every wall, every piece of furniture, every corner had a memory etched into it, some good, most poisoned now. Eventually, I sold it. The profit was decent, but the real reward was cutting ties to that chapter. I bought a smaller place closer to the base. Clean lines, fresh walls, no history bleeding through the drywall. It was mine alone, without shadows. I had my truck, my savings, and the hard-earned lesson that complete trust can be a dangerous gamble. Afghanistan had taught me about surviving in hostile territory, about keeping your head down when bullets fly and never letting your guard slip. But coming home had taught me about another kind of survival, the kind where the enemy wears a familiar face and betrayal cuts deeper than shrapnel ever could. When my commanding officer offered me another overseas assignment, I turned it down. For once, I wanted to stay stateside, to breathe, to figure out what the next version of my life was supposed to look like. Some evenings, I'd sit out on my back porch with a cold drink, watching the sun melt behind the desert mountains. That's when the alternative timeline would creep into my mind. The version of life where I never questioned anything, where I believed Emily's story, where I raised another man's child, thinking it was my own, pouring 18 years of love, sweat, and money into a lie. That version of Rayn Smith would have been a ghost, living someone else's truth, trapped in someone else's script. I was grateful I wasn't him. I preferred the truth, even when it hurt, even when it burned everything down around me. The military had drilled it into me from day one. Clear intelligence leads to better decisions. Whether it's war or marriage, facts matter more than feelings. Emily's plan failed not because I was smarter, but because she underestimated something as simple as mathematics. She thought emotions could cover the gap, but numbers don't lie. 32 weeks is 32 weeks. As time passed, I came to see betrayal in a new light. Anger fades, pain dulls. What lingers is the clarity. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't rage or revenge. It's refusing to live inside someone else's lies. And that's what I did. I stepped out of her web, out of her story, and into my own. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have, but it was honest. And for me, that was enough.